right, my Renowned fam, welcome back to the Renowned Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Morris, and today I got a very special guest, and I know this is cringe before I say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I got my brother from another mother, Anthony Dix Jr. here with me today, and we talked a while back, and we were both wearing hoodies and ball caps, totally not professional looking at all. And he commented on it. It's like, yeah, man, I believe in just being comfortable. So I showed up today wearing a polo, not my hoodie. Now you can see I've changed into my hoodie because I got called out in grand fashion for not, and I felt horrible, man. I felt like I betrayed my brother. And so I had to go put my hoodie on, man. How you doing, Anthony?
I am outstanding, Stephen. Thank you so very much. Number one, for going to get that hoodie. Because I picked out, you know what I'm saying? I knew I was coming on with you and that you were a pretty chill guy. And I thought we bonded with, the Scullies and the ball caps and the hoodies the last time doing our little meet and greet there. So thank you so very much for going to get that hoodie, number one. Number two, though, really number one, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to an engaging conversation. And our conversations, man, just offline have been so enlightening and so engaging. I feel like you're a brother from another mother. There's no cringe there, man. Like that's just the way that is. We both. I didn't serve in the military to the extent that you did, but we did both serve in the United States military, and you know that how that goes. We both see green. So who to you, and thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So give us your background a little bit. I know you're a partner, I believe, in your 180 consulting. Is it? I can't remember.
Yep, it's
Man,
180 Management Group. Yeah, and
there
you're
you go.
right. I'm a part. Listen, you just gave me a promotion. I don't mind because I am married to the CEO. That's fine. The CEO of 180 Management Group is my lovely wife, Miriam Dix. I serve as the senior leadership consultant, one of them, a senior leadership consultant. And so 180 Management Group is a management consulting firm that specializes in transforming nonprofit organizations, particularly in areas of strategic planning, operations, and leadership. And so that's a little bit about what we do. We are change agents to help transformative organizations like nonprofits get back to doing what they really do best, and that's changing the world and accomplishing mission. And again, of course, I'm married to the CEO, so I'm grateful to have a job, and hopefully in our time together, I don't say nothing that gets us fired or me fired.
So I mean, no, I mean, it's funny because my wife, she, like I told you earlier, she has absolutely nothing to do with what I do, but she still very much considers herself the senior executive in my company. So I feel, hey, role reversed, right? Like you get to consider
Yeah.
yourself the senior executive, right? Like that's how it
Why
works.
not? You know, I mean, why not? As long as she don't see this now, Miriam, if you see this, I'm just playing. But yeah,
That's
for
awesome.
now, I'll be the senior executive. That's fine. That's good. Let's roll with it.
So what really drove you, the two of you, into the nonprofit space? Because that's a pretty niche um area that I honestly don't know a lot about. So what really drove
Really?
your company? Yeah, I mean, I've worked with some nonprofits, and I've volunteered with some nonprofits, but as far as running a day to day for a nonprofit, I really don't know anything about it. So
Hmm.
what drove you guys to that space?
Well, they do very meaningful work, and it's not that for-profit institutions don't do meaningful work. It's that some of the drivers of nonprofits are just different. But by definition, a nonprofit's effectiveness can't be measured by profit. So they have to measure it by something else. And that's some type of social change, some community change, making our society better as best they possibly can. And most of them, as you may know this, have a tendency to be understaffed or underfunded or really underappreciated. And because of several of those things, they have opportunities to really become, just great institutions for change. And we wanted to live into that. We wanted to serve in a sector where we could have the greatest impact. We just saw our ability to help organizations change, particularly the nonprofits, having the greatest impact on the planet. Having a for-profit business is one thing, but having a for-profit business that helps nonprofits is one of those drivers that we believe is just, it's just a godsend to help change the world as best we can. We may not be in a position to do the work that they do, but we can definitely come alongside and enhance them as they do that work. And that's how we saw ourselves best positioned to do that.
I love that. And was there a significance to um wanting to give back for, because I know especially with you being military, myself as well, like I always, when it comes to like veteran communities and things like that, I just feel drawn to give to them. Is there any other significance that, where a nonprofit maybe helped you out early on in your life or something like that, that kind of gave you this passion?
Yeah, well, my mom is an educator, and of course, education, that's government, that's public, so that's not necessarily for profit. My dad is a pastor, and he also owns and operates a funeral home. But that came about after I was a little bit older. I was about 20, 21 years old. So he was still operating in funeral service, but he was also serving a local church. I've been a math teacher. I've been a associate director of admissions at a Lutheran seminary. So I know I served in churches. So that nonprofit space um, is on the faith-based side, on the government side, and then having inroads and insights to professionals who are serving on the social sector side. My wife was an administrator in a hospital system. And so it was a not-for-profit, which is a little bit different than a nonprofit, but yet and still there was a lot of service to the community and serving others through healthcare. That's just been our space, man. That's just been our space, and it's of course, no slight against for-profit entities. It's just for-profit entities get a lot of attention when it comes to transformation, change management, leadership development, and those resources are often needed most in nonprofit spaces, but not offered most there. And we wanted to close that gap so that our best people, personnel, insight, ideas, innovations are being invested in those areas because of how close they serve the community and have that community impact that we think just makes the country better and makes the world better too.
No, I agree completely. And that's kind of why I asked that question because um it's not a far stretch to connect a nonprofit company to most of our lives. It's our
Yep.
most for most of us, our lives has been touched by a nonprofit in some way or another, even if we
Hmm.
don't realize it. And I
Hmm.
think it's such important work. And what I think a lot of people don't realize, for a lot of nonprofits, especially the board members, right? Like they see the
Yep.
board members and they think, they're sitting in a cushy job. From a lot of the board members, at least in my experience, tell me if I'm wrong. For a lot of those board members, that's a part-time job, a part-time, full-time
Yeah.
job. They have
Yeah.
another career on the side
Hmm.
that they're doing
Hmm.
full-time as well as being
Hmm.
a full-time board member on this nonprofit.
Yeah. You're
Um, a
exactly
good
right.
a good friend of mine runs a nonprofit in Florida to help the homeless get into affordable housing, and she's a doctor.
Mm.
um
Mm.
uh, and so like I can't imagine trying to maximize her doctor schedule along with board meetings running,
Yeah.
being the CEO of this nonprofit. I couldn't imagine that hustle. So I think when people, before you judge a nonprofit,
Mhm.
you need to look and do your research and get the full story is my basic point of that. um
Exactly. Exactly.
so
They
um
do major work. They do major work.
they
And
do.
again, like your doctor friend, she may find people appreciate the things that she does medically, but maybe not as much the things that she does from an affordable housing standpoint. And just the position that people put themselves in when they're doing that work, because you had a lot of oversight. You've got some restrictions as to how you might be able to go about getting certain things done. and your heart is in it. I mean, that's a very passionate initiative that she's undertaking. And that kind of stuff needs support, not just support financially, but also emotional support, mental support, human capital support. And as we've learned, a lot of resources aren't invested in people like your doctor friend in Florida who was doing that kind of good work to make their jobs easier so that everybody can experience a little bit of life, a little bit of life better.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So, what got you? I mean, like we've already talked about your military background, but what really got you into the leadership consulting space?
You know, the easy answer, Stephen, is my wife told me to do it. But you didn't bring me on here to talk about easy answers. Seriously though, seriously though, I somehow, some way, you would appreciate this. Somehow, some way, I have found myself over the years in leadership positions, right? Um, as a child, the son of a pastor, I had access to the stage. I had access to the platform, and in many instances was, forced into public speaking. Um, and then by that, elementary school, speaking at certain events in elementary school, and then being put on certain teams, committees. And one of the places I began to realize, okay, man, maybe I'm on something different is when I was in the military, and you could appreciate this. We were in basic training, and I probably shouldn't be disclosing some of this stuff. You know what? This is 20 something years ago. They probably don't do it like this no more. You remember when they chose that first platoon guy,
Oh yeah.
right? You knew, well, after a few cycles, not that I've been in for, I learned afterwards, like, oh, that first platoon guy is supposed to get fired. Like, he's going to get fired. There's no way you begin the training in that 8 weeks as platoon guy and then you get fired. What I did know is those squad leaders get fired too.
Mhm.
And so after a few rounds in basic training, I became a squad leader. Like, what did I do to deserve this kind of punishment? And I learned that there was some leadership capability and capacity there. And the feedback that I got from my squad and other people in the platoon about how I carried myself and things of that nature really helped to bolster that idea of leadership. And that's just the space that I've been in for as long as I can possibly remember. And I've had the opportunity to develop other leaders. I've had the opportunity to coach CEOs, CMOs, C-suite leaders, nonprofit leaders, EDs at just about every level. And it's always been in some type of coaching capacity. And so getting into the consulting space where you do coaching, but you also do some consulting as to how we can go about putting some systems in place to be at our best as leaders to enhance your leadership and to make sure we got some systems in place that are advantageous for your particular style of leadership that leads to exceptional performance for your organization and your team. That was just a natural progression for me. It was just a natural progression for me. I did not choose leadership. Somehow or another, leadership kind of chose me. Like I I I grew up here and I had a great mathematical mind. So I was like, okay, I'll be a math teacher. And now look at me. So that's just how life goes, man. And it kind of chose me. I didn't necessarily choose it.
Yeah. So, how long did you last as the squad leader before you got fired?
I I was the last squad leader that platoon had.
Oh,
So I think
wow.
I got chosen like my group, we got chosen like week 3 or 4, and we maintained it until the end. We maintained it until
Impressive.
the end.
Impressive. I
I
think
know, right?
I made it. I made it 2 weeks because I might have mouthed off to the drill sergeant.
Real. I think we got our platoon guy fired, but he just wasn't necessarily the right guy. Now we had the last platoon guy we had was at the time, I think he might have been a preacher. And the stress got to him so bad, man, that we thought he lost his religion because it was just like he started it not cursing, not doing anything profane, but by the end, nah, man. he was giving us the business. So
Uh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
it was
So for people that aren't
fun times.
familiar, as you go through basic training, the very first thing drill sergeants do and it varies depending on your MOS and where you're going to basic training at. But the drill sergeants will pick one, what they call a platoon guide. That's basically kind of like a platoon leader. Um,
Mhm.
and then that platoon guide will have four squad leaders. And well, was it two or four for you?
It was four. It was
Four.
four.
Okay.
It was four for us. Yep.
So yeah, they'll have four squad leaders. I think in some in the smaller BCTs, it's only two, but that's besides the point. The point is that these dudes get put in leadership positions to just basically start developing the leader, and pretty much the
Mhm.
majority of the platoon will have some sort of leadership role. It may not be the PG or a squad leader. There are other leadership roles, but every person in the platoon will cycle through at some point, and that's where the leadership development starts. The reason I ask is, and my audience is probably going to roll their eyes because they're probably sick of hearing this, but it just blows my mind. So I bring it up every freaking podcast because it needs to be said, because it's crap. Did you know MIT did a study and they found that the average American adult doesn't receive formal leadership training until they're 44 and a half years old?
I believe that wholeheartedly. Like I have this whole framework, especially in the nonprofit spaces, because many of our organizations, from an employment standpoint, we defer leadership development to some other institutions. We do not do it inside our institution. So I believe that wholeheartedly, because that's leadership development. I don't know why it's that way. Is just pushed to the side for someone else to do. And the military does a great job of doing it. I think sports and entertainment does a good job of doing that as well. So team sports kind of gives people an opportunity to see
Mhm.
that. But other areas, especially from a business perspective, that we really don't get formal leadership training. And I believe that. Now, 44, that sounds about right. I believe that wholeheartedly. I
I
see
mean,
it in real time.
it blows my mind, Anthony. And here's the reason, because and you know, right? Like I'm sure you remember your first day out there on the range,
Man,
and
yes.
you had that one dude that grew up shooting guns, and all he did was talk about how good he was
Mhm.
at shooting guns, and then he
Yep.
gets out there on the
Yep.
range and don't hit nothing. It takes him all day
Yep.
just to zero, right?
Yeah.
And
That was
but
my battle buddy. That was my battle buddy. His
did you
name
get
was
stuck with
Private
him?
Newhouse. I hope he ain't listening, but his name was Private Newhouse. Man, Newhouse was talking about all the stuff. I think you grew up in Colorado or something like that. Man, we got out there to BRM. No, sighting that weapon took forever, man.
Yeah, it's horrible. And but then you have the guys that have never picked up a rifle before in their life. And because they
Mm-hmm.
understand that they know nothing, they pay attention to what the drill instructors and the range instructors are teaching. And so they develop
Yep.
good habits very fast, and they're able to function at a very high capacity very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I bring this up is because so I can teach you how to shoot at a target and hit it every single time. If you've never picked up a rifle, I can bring you out to my house. We'll go spend 8 hours. I will teach you from the safety aspects of handling a weapon to, zeroing it and then hitting your target at 500 meters. Now, for those of you that don't know, a target at 500 meters looks like the tip of a pin. It's tiny. It's very
Yeah,
hard
it's
to
a
hit,
long ways away.
but I can teach you to hit it every single time if you've never picked up a rifle. If you have picked up a rifle, it's going to take me weeks to
Mm-hmm.
untrain bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to take me weeks to retrain the good habits.
Yep.
Right. So, why in the world do you think companies, businesses, just in general, do we wait 2 decades to allow 2 decades of bad habits to set in? So then at 44 and a
Mm-hmm.
half years old, we get to untrain all these ridiculous bad habits and try to start building a new foundation.
I I really don't get it. And you got my wheels turning just about how just in so many organizations, again, they factor leadership development to someone else. They kind of they just leave that for some other institution to do. And again, in my leadership development framework, institutions like higher education, there's no way to become a college professor without going through the college system. So higher education has a system to develop professors. Now, we won't get on the administrative side with deans and presidents and all the rest of that stuff, but from just a foundational perspective, if you're going to have more faculty members, they've got a way to keep training teachers for higher education. The military has a way, once you come in, you can get trained to be a leader. It's institutionalized. From AAU, Pop Warner, and a whole host of other, there is a athletic pipeline so that by the time you get to the NBA, by the time you get to the NFL, the NHL, the MLB, nobody in those institutions are talking about a talent shortage when it comes to athletes. But when it comes to those of us who work in corporate spaces, work in businesses, work in nonprofits, we don't have institutionalized systems to develop us as leaders. That becomes something that either we are supposed to do ourselves, or we think we'll just go back to school. And the soft skills, like school is, my wife gonna get on me before I just said school. I said school in a very South Carolina way just then, school. But anyway, so school um does an amazing job with skills training and giving you the hard skills in order to provide technical proficiency within your profession. But leadership requires a lot of soft skills that in many instances can't be learned without a laboratory. I call leadership an artful science. It's an art, is nuanced. There is science to it. You can study it scientifically, but the only way to get provided, the only way to become a better leader, somebody's got to provide you the opportunity to do so with oversight to kind of
Right.
guide you. Like that's why you have a platoon guide. The platoon guide was under the auspices of the drill sergeant. So it's the drill sergeant's responsibility to help bring the platoon guide along and help develop them. That's the way that it's got to be done. But we don't have many apprentice systems. There's still some apprentice systems for professions that require certain licensing, like a funeral director, embalmer. That has to have an apprentice. I think in order to be an electrician or a plumber, that's some apprentice stuff. And again, that's an apprentice to do a very technical skill. But when it comes to a CEO apprentice or an apprentice to be an executive director or a human resource manager, we really don't have those systems. And it is a travesty because cultivating leadership is an organizational asset. It really,
Yeah,
really is.
it absolutely is. And, with my company in general, one of my favorite things is we try to get into companies that are just starting, right?
Mm.
They're either they've hired a small team or they're about to hire a small team to start really scaling. And we like to get in there early and help build a culture before the culture becomes toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
because it's a lot more fun to help build a culture from the ground up than it is to demo a toxic culture and get all that garbage out of it and then rebuild it.
Yep.
That's actually not really that much fun at all. So, but I mean, the key thing, like you touched on so many important things, the soft skills, right? Like a lot of times, especially like CEOs or CAOs, like they'll be like, now are you going to teach SSAS? And I just look at them, I'm like, I don't even know what SSAS is. Well, that's this software tech blah. I'm like, I don't care, right? Like that's not my job. My job is to teach your people how to lead people, right? Not how to lead a
Mm-hmm.
computer. Like that's your job. Like
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
the hard skills, the technical stuff, like that doesn't matter. Leadership is leadership. Leadership is the exact same as it is in the military, as it is in a hospital, as it is in a school,
Yep.
as it is. Did I say
Yep.
school right? Is your wife going to yell at me for saying school wrong?
No, I made it more syllables than it needed to be because of my
Gotcha.
southern drawl. You got it
Gotcha.
good.
Yeah. So where's your wife from?
She's from South Carolina, but she's kind of from South Carolina and New Jersey. She was born in South
Gotcha.
Carolina, then moved to New Jersey for a little while, then came back to South Carolina. So we have these things about different types of country accents, and yeah, but we won't get into
Gotcha.
that.
Gotcha. I
You
lived
said
in
speak perfectly.
I lived in North Carolina for a while when I was in high school, and man, I didn't ice like what? Like I say, what are you trying? Like I want some ice. Some what? What?
Yeah.
Oil? But what the heck is
Oh, that's what you
oil?
put in your car.
Nah, oil?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, man.
Like,
Oh,
oh, you mean oil? That's what I said. Oh, no, you said hole. It's like it's not even a word. It's just a sound. Like you know what I mean? Like oh man, it used to drive me nuts. So I'm totally vibing with your wife right now because that stuff like that drives me nuts. Anyway, but yeah, leadership is the same no matter where you go, right? It's about people. It's about developing culture. It's about developing communication. It's about
yeah.
developing consistency within the organization to help your people feel
Mhm.
emotionally safe, physically safe, and allow them to really do their work and innovate whatever your field is. And so
Mhm.
I think that is so important that we understand that we can't be waiting. Uh, by the time people get to the 40s, by the time people are middle management and up, the damage is already done.
Mhm.
And now we have a high turnover. And I don't remember what who wrote I think it was a Forbes article we're talking about oh no, it was the Society of Human Resource Managers. They did research
Okay.
and on average a Fortune 500 company spends $3,000 to $5,000 per person to reacquire talent, right? So every
Wow.
time, right? So when you factor in the fact, Amazon, how many people does Amazon employ? I have no idea. We're going to say 30,000. That may be too big, maybe too small. I have no clue. But, you're
Wow.
going to figure that
Man.
on any given day, Amazon's looking for maybe 1,000 people. Like that's $5,000 a pop. That suddenly becomes huge. Then when you
Yeah.
factor in the fact that some of those positions are going to be middle management, maybe executive leadership type roles.
Mhm.
Now you're looking at an
Mhm.
even higher number. And the higher it goes, you could be looking into hundreds of thousands, right?
That's great.
And our process of going through this hiring and training and onboarding and all this stuff, it's so I don't know a good word, decentralized, I guess. That's not the right word. Hmm. I'll come back to I can't really think of the right word, but it's just so uh di- dysfunctional that
Yeah.
it's
That might be
costing
better.
us
Yeah.
it's costing us so much money. And yet companies are
Mhm.
still doing it. And that's what
Mhm.
really blows my mind. Like there's a better system, let's adopt the better system.
Yeah, and it is so challenging from a societal perspective because we may not be putting people in the best positions to assume leadership because this is so big of a challenge that we see it again across industries. There are challenges within the faith-based industry, with the faith-based sector, I'll put it that way, with regards to leadership. As a former associate director of admissions, we saw significant numbers decline when it came to people discerning a call to assume leadership within a church. It's like that just it just dissipated. So the pipeline for seminaries is becoming much more restricted than what it was 20 to 30 years ago. You see challenges with succession in regards to the nonprofit sector. You're going to see challenges with the great wealth transfer that people are talking about, with a lot of people who have come into wealth. They don't have anyone to bequeath that wealth to. on top of these positions. I think it was the Today Show several weeks ago may have been talking about the number of people who are going to be turning 65 this year, and how the retirement age is just is putting pressure on our system economically from an employment perspective, and we are not producing people to assume greater responsibility. It is not that we're less skilled from a hard skill perspective. It's not that we type slower. It's not that we calculate things at a much slower rate. Is in many instances our human skills, our ability to lead other people is an area of growth for so many professionals. And I think a part of it, Stephen, is because we don't often see that as a skill. We see that as a talent.
Mhm.
Talent is something that you might be born with. Skill is something you can enhance and harness. And because we are still in our leadership conversation, having conversations based on the great man theory that purported that leaders are born and not made, we are not shifting our conversation to a place where we're talking about leadership as a skill that can be developed, acquired, developed, and refined over time. You can develop the skill to lead. It can be refined, and we need to find systems or create systems to institutionalize that in each idiosyncratic organization. I believe that every organization needs a leadership development program, all of them, because that's how you perpetuate the vitality and sustainability of your organization.
You're absolutely right. And we're not talking, he didn't say management development, he said leadership development. And I think that's one of the big cruxes is we've made managing and leading synonymous, but it's not. They're two completely separate things. You do need good managers. Managers are very important. But you also need leaders. And just because you're a manager, that doesn't make you a leader. And something you
Right.
said kind of stuck with me because I got to thinking about it. If you go read Dr. King's journals,
Yep. Yeah, the legacy programs. Yeah.
if you go read George Washington's journals, um, and those are the only two that are popping to my head right now. I'm sure there are others I've read. You will you'll hear them talk about or read them talking about the weight of leadership. Like they didn't
Mhm.
want that leadership. It just kind of
Yeah.
happened. And
Hmm.
they saw a problem. And my motto is if you see a problem and you complain about it, you're a part of the problem. If you see a problem and try to fix it, then you're a part of the solution. Right.
Yes,
So
sir.
so
Yes,
they
sir.
saw a problem. They decided to try to fix it rather than complain about it. What that led to was them becoming the amazing examples of leadership that they've become in history. But
Hmm.
I think the most important lesson in this conversation is they didn't want it. Like they didn't go looking for it. They weren't born with it. Was Dr. King born with a certain amount of charisma? Sure, sure, that is a born trait. Sure, maybe. Was George Washington born with a specific strategic mind? Sure, maybe. But
Hmm.
that doesn't make the leader, right? That just
Right.
helps enhance the leader. So I
Yep.
mean, all the amazing skills that we saw from George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Dr. King, JFK,
Hmm.
Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, like these are things that they learned over time
Hmm.
from either their education, their self discovery pursuits, their self awareness pursuits, or maybe even
Yeah.
just because they had amazing, great mentors growing up in their life. But it drives me nuts when people look at somebody, um, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that dude's just a natural born leader." No, he's not. There's no such thing.
It, in a certain age of human sociology and evolution, that may have been the case. because there were forces in the environment that required someone who was built a certain way, had certain
Right.
strength,
Bigger,
to
stronger,
be the one
faster.
protecting everybody from right. But as we've evolved, especially in the industrial age, not just with agriculture, because we that's the hunter gatherer kind of thing. Like if you want to be as a leader born and made, if you're in a hunter gatherer kind of environment, then maybe so. Because if he can't hunt or she can't hunt, she can't gather, then they probably don't need to be the one leading the pack. Because you got things that require certain type of physicality. But after agricultural age, the industrial age, and now we're living in well, the information age and the digital age, like leadership has to be something different because we can acquire skills at a pace that people who lived back then, they just can't do. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen The Matrix?
Oh yeah, of course.
So you
You know
know
where
when
that comes
Trinity is
from,
in a
right?
helicopter where,
The Matrix. You know where that story comes from, right?
no, tell
Re-
me,
Rene
educate
De-
me, Steve.
so Rene Descartes is an ancient philosopher. He's the
Yeah,
one.
he's a mathematician and a lawyer. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's the one. I think, therefore, I am.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah,
That's
that's
him.
the original Matrix.
Wow.
That's where they got the Matrix from.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Rene Descartes. See, you speaking my language. Because Rene Descartes he was a philosopher, he was a lawyer, and he was a mathematician.
dude
And
was brilliant. He's my favorite.
the grid that we have in mathematics, they call it a Cartesian plane, named after Rene Descartes.
I didn't
Cartesian
know that.
Descartes. Yep. It's a Cartesian plane. So, like in the Matrix, Trinity, you remember when she was in a helicopter and said, I don't know how to fly a plane? They just got that little card and uploaded it, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying that that's possible. But what I am saying is the way that human beings acquire skill now, we're acquiring skill at a different rate. And so those requisite primal things don't necessarily have to be there to make someone a good leader. You don't have to be 6'2" with square shoulders, big biceps, and just be extremely cerebral and charismatic. There are other ways in which you can contribute to society from a leadership perspective that is different from managing. Management requires 4 disciplines primarily: planning, all right, organizing, motivating, and controlling. So a manager is going to plan, they're going to organize, they're going to motivate, control. Plan, organize, motivate, control. Now, some people use motivate synonymously with leadership, and that's okay. People who are in management positions do have a responsibility to lead. And so there, if that's a part of those 4 portions of management, then that if you can become a better planner, if you can get better at organizing, if you can get better at controlling, you can definitely gain skill and improve as a leader. And I hope something that in this conversation is kind of hitting home is for really people to invest in the development of your own leadership skill. The world needs that. Your organization needs that. Your community needs that. We are in a time where we are experiencing a vacuum of leadership. I don't want to get in no trouble, Stephen, but we we were talking this morning. We heard a story. I don't know. I can't remember when it was, but they were talking about the Pope, and we're in election phase, and so age is a big deal in this election cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we were thinking about, the Pope is 80 plus. The King of England is in his 70s, like late 70s. The Republican and Democratic candidates for president, one of them is 77, the other one is 81. And at this point, Nikki Haley is still in the race. So she's not as old as they are. She's, I don't know how old she is. But man, someone has to wake up and say, are these the best leaders our populations have to offer?
No.
Are are these the best? And I'm
I'm
talking
gonna
about
go with no.
but given what you said about MIT,
Fair. Yeah.
No one at
Fair.
44 is going to have 30, no one at 44 is going to have enough leadership experience to be able to lead a country
Right.
because they didn't get started with that leadership skill until they were in their 40s. And I think that's that's not soon enough. That's not soon enough. And we
I
should do
agree.
a better job as a culture with cultivating leaders who could possibly lead long before they're in their 70s. Like, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like
We need
that's
we
like
need another
we gotta we
JFK.
gotta be we gotta be able to do something. Somebody should have a leadership development pipeline to where our civic leaders have some type of training in order to lead civically. Like it's something.
Right. Have you ever
I'm
been to
sorry. I'm
Japan,
gonna get off my
Anthony?
soapbox.
No,
I have
I
not
love the
been to Japan.
soapbox. So one of and China, I believe, does the same thing. But one of the cool things Japan does is so students the first like 5 years they're in school, they
Okay.
learn nothing. Like obviously they learn like reading and writing basics, mathematic basics, science. They learn the basic stuff, but the first thing they're taught are social skills. They're taught to be
Wow.
polite, courteous, respectful.
Yep.
They're taught to
Hmm.
clean. Schools
Really?
and yeah, those schools don't have janitors. The children do it all,
Wow.
right? Then and so that and that for that being said, they have no tests, right? So a school child is not going to take a test until they would be in what we call middle school. That's the first time they would be exposed to a test. And
Wow.
even then, the tests aren't necessarily like what how do I what I don't know how we would term our like it's not it's proficiency. The sole purpose of the tests in Japan aren't to pass or fail, it's to see proficiency, to make sure that the students are learning what they need to learn. If not, then they need to reevaluate the teacher's curriculum. Um and that goes on until they're about to college, and then that's when the actual like what we consider testing, that's when that starts. But I think it's incredible because the first thing kids learn in school is just
Hmm.
how to live in society, which I feel like, not to be political, but we've really lost that in the United States hardcore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like
Yep.
I
Yep.
don't care what side of the aisle you fall on, you can't disagree with that. Like we've lost the ability to exist together. um
Hmm.
and that's
Civilly.
very bad.
Yep.
um but I mean that's the first thing these kids are taught, and then they're taught how to lead each other, right? We want to be competitive. Maybe we should start reevaluating what's important, because I don't know the numbers, but I'm pretty sure Japan kicks our butt when it comes to uh
They do.
school, right? And
They
like I
do.
said, I don't know the numbers, but when it comes to literacy, mathematics, science, all that stuff, I'm pretty sure they kick our butt. So obviously they're doing something that works. So maybe we need to reevaluate and start teaching these things early before
Hmm.
they can develop bad habits.
Hmm.
And then when they hit, they graduate from college and they go hit the workforce, they already know the basics of leadership. Now all they have to do is find a good mentor.
Hmm. I remember when I was in school, that you got me saying school again, Stephen. I remember when I was growing up, I put it like that. I remember there was a time when you wanted to be in the front of the line, where you wanted to lead the class in doing something, right? Those things were celebrated at a minimum by adults. Now, I don't know what class is like now, but when I was in when I was in class, especially in my like kindergarten, first grade, I'm trying not to say school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, though it may have been celebrated by the teachers, there was some contention amongst the students. Oh, you just want to be the teacher's pet. Oh, you just, and so amongst our peers, we were leading in that capacity was frowned upon.
Right.
It wasn't celebrated. But the teachers kind of celebrate it. But without that social affirmation from your peers, it builds in you. Well, I don't want to be in the front, because what happens to people who get put in the front is they get picked at. What happens to people who get put in the front, who are leaders, they get frowned upon. And that social dynamic does not bode well for the building of leadership at young ages. We have to find a way to cultivate the seed of leadership in our children, in our students, in such a way where leadership is viewed as an asset, not only amongst the teachers and the adults who are providing the education, but amongst the children. We've got, and see, you got me on another soapbox. We've got a population, I'm not even going to say a generation, but a population of people who are more interested in being influencers than they are leaders. Leadership and influence, though influence is a part of leadership, it is not the sum total of leadership. You can influence someone that you have no responsibility towards. Leadership assumes responsibility. If you're going to be a leader, you are assuming that I am being responsible for how I influence. And that responsibility should lend itself to the promoting of protection and promotion of the flourishing of others. And those things can be embedded in our culture if we took some time to really infuse leadership curriculum and leadership teaching and training to those who are still yet enamored by being called to the front to write it. Well, they don't have chalkboards anymore. I don't know what they, Promethean board or whatever they have right now, who are recognized in school with leadership, quote unquote, potential, which I believe every child has. I just think that we need to do a better job, not only from an adult perspective, but also amongst our younger generations, to really celebrate leadership socially and not just celebrate it from a celebrity standpoint.
I agree completely. Um, One of the things I was never allowed to say growing up was that um, Barry Sanders was my hero, or Joe Montana was my hero. Um, Joe Montana was a little before my time, but who was after him? Steve
Steve Young.
Young. So Steve Young, Jerry Rice. Like, I was never allowed to idolize pop culture or sport people, or at
Hmm.
least verbalize it. My dad was a firm believer that there were far too many great examples in history that are currently at the time um, doing things in science, medicine,
Oh,
politics,
wow.
whatever,
Yeah.
that I shouldn't be wasting. Like, I was allowed to watch sports and be a part of it, but I wasn't allowed to idolize it, kind of.
Hmm.
And so, when I talk about George Washington and Dr. King and JFK, like, those dudes are legit my heroes. Like, those are the dudes I grew up idolizing because
Mhm.
that my dad wouldn't let me do anything else. Right. And so I think that's what gave me such a mind for this is I'm looking at what these dudes do. And I'm like, man, like, I want to do that. Like, I want to
Yeah.
be, I want to make history. Right. I
Yeah.
want history to remember me like that. And so I think that that was the key part for me anyway. But I agree 100%. It needs to be, and think about the it's not just in school where being the teacher's pet is a thing. You go to a normal blue collar job, and someone that's trying to get promoted and move up
Hmm.
in the company
Hmm.
is going to be made fun of, right? And so I don't quite understand the disposition of those people where it's like, I want to stay an hourly employee the rest of my life. Like I've never, I guess I guess it comes from my parents. I don't know. I've always had that drive of like, I have to go as far as I can.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
With,
yeah.
it's not
Optimize
even a,
performance. That's what it's all
yeah.
about. Yeah. How can I optimize what my talent, my skill, my purpose, my drive of life? How can I optimize that? You would keep talking about Dr. King, and while you were talking about Dr. King the last time, I thought about I didn't know what I was listening to. When I was a child, my dad had a cassette tape, and it was of several of Dr. King's messages. So I'm seven, 5, 6, 7 years old, and I
Sermons or
got that thing
speeches.
on repeat. Sermons.
His
Yeah.
sermons were fire.
Yeah, his sermons. So sermons like how to make the best of a bad mess, the drum major, just a whole just and
Yeah.
it was just cassette tape and didn't have headphones back then, but we had a little tape player and I used to listen to them things on repeat and thinking about how heroes, even in ancient culture, heroes shape culture.
Hmm.
So you can tell a lot about a culture by the heroes they celebrate. So if you want a snapshot of where culture is headed, just look at who they celebrate the most. And if you were to step back, like in your life, you were only allowed to celebrate history makers in certain genres of professionalism out outside of sports and entertainment. And so because those were your heroes, it's built a certain culture in you personally. Within our American context, I'm not sure if we are celebrating the right heroes because the people who get the most press these days, I'm not sure if they can hold their weight with other heroes with regards to the burden of leadership.
I agree completely. I agree wholeheartedly. That's some good stuff, man. I really hate to cut this conversation off, but um, we're running out of time. So, man, this has been a deep conversation. We're gonna have to continue this later when we have more time. So,
Cool. I'm open to it. Let's do it.
yeah, man, there's so many things I want to say. But before we bounce anything, go ahead and tell people how they can find out more about what you're doing. And man, I'm still reeling. I gotta stop. Give me a second. Okay. So go ahead and tell people how they can find out more about what you're doing, get a hold of you, and maybe get a hold of some of the amazing services you and your company offer.
Well, first and foremost, thanks again for having me on. But thank you more importantly for putting on that hood tonight or today, whatever. I don't know what time it is. I'm in a room. I can't see anything. But anyway, so thank you so much for that. If anyone would like to learn a little bit more about what we do at 180 Management Group, you feel free to go to 180managementgroup.com. That's 180 management group, all one word, .com. And you'll go there and you'll see what it is that we offer. And if you'd like to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can connect with me. Just look up Anthony A. Dix Jr. or just go LinkedIn /IN /AA Dix Jr. And shoot me a message. Let me know you heard me on the Renowned Leadership Podcast, and I'll make sure to go ahead and hit that connect, and hopefully we can get a conversation going about how you can become one of these cultural heroes, as Stephen said, one of these history makers that can hopefully turn the tide on our culture so that we can get to a better place for our future.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I agree. And last thought I'm going to say is, I get sick and tired of hearing people say, "I'm just one person. There's nothing I can do." Well, George Washington was just one person, and he did a whole lot. Joan of Arc was
Mhm.
just one person, and she did a whole lot. Jesus Christ was just one person. And I don't, the historical figure of Jesus Christ did a whole lot. No matter what your
Mm-hmm.
religion is, I ain't preaching at you,
Nope.
but, you know, there are tons and tons of people as you go through history that were just one person and they did a whole lot. So stop complaining, stop being a part of the problem, and start being a part of the solution, and accepting your role and responsibility in society. Like Anthony said, leadership is accepting your responsibility. So Anthony, before I
Yes.
let you go, um, you get the final word. But my final question is, what does leading like a champion mean to you?
Leading like a champion to me means that you don't become a champion if you haven't had challenges. And a
Hmm.
champion is the sum total of the challenges that they have overcome. And so if you are experiencing great challenges, it's because you have an opportunity to become a great champion. I'll say that again. If you are experiencing great challenge, you don't have Muhammad Ali without George Foreman. You don't have him
Yep.
without the Thriller in Manila. Those great challenges made him into a great champion. And leading like a champion is about overcoming those challenges. And the way that you do it is you got to maintain your disciplines. You got to keep training. You got to keep your head up. More importantly, you need to have the right people in your corner. And remember that there's a future champion out there in the crowd who's watching how you handle this challenge. So that's what leading like a champion means to me.
That is the most thoughtful and best answer I've ever had. Like, not even lying. That is great. So
Wow.
anyway, again, I'm sorry that I have to cut this conversation off, but we're out of time, and I got another recording here in a minute. But of course, everybody, you know the deal. I'm going to have all of Anthony's links in the bio and in the show notes. So make sure you scroll all the way down. Go give him and his wife tons and tons of love, because they're doing amazing work at 180. And I fully support them. I only bring the best and people that I am okay putting my name behind. So make sure you do that. Once you're done checking them out, go to renownedleadership.com. Come give me some love, shoot me a message. And so that's going to wrap it up this week, guys. I will catch y'all next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. And in the meantime, never, ever, ever, ever forget, lead like a champion. Goodbye, everybody.